There's a difference between loving an idea and loving a person, between trusting ourselves and trusting others, allowing them the freedom of their own experience. And what a terrifying but powerful thing that is to give somebody. Maybe the greatest freedom is allowing others to have their own experience. Those that specialize tend to feel trapped in their identity the most because they are paying attention to how they're doing what they're doing and not what they're actually doing. Hands down, the biggest shift that anybody ever makes in their economic life is escaping the time for money trap. You also give them that thing that we all desperately want from time to time in different domains, which is permission to walk out on the ice. No problem. Look, others have survived. It's strong enough to hold you. And that's where I see you really change people's lives.
Well, good day, everyone. This is Dr. David Phelps of the Freedom Founders Mastermind Group and the Dentist Freedom Blueprint podcast. Today, really interested in having a conversation with my good friend, actually a good friend of many. Many of you already know him, but I want to bring back Mr. Alistair McDonald. Alistair, good to have you here, sir.
It's a pleasure to be back, David.
We get a chance to jump into a lot of deep conversations, and so many people aren't privy to those, and it's probably a good thing sometimes where we go. But I think something we've talked about quite a bit recently that you and I both have experience in, and that is really a reinvention of ourselves. So often in life, we follow a pathway that's been kind of deemed for us. Sometimes we're tapped on the head at an early age and said, "Oh, you're really good at analytics, you should be an engineer," or "You're good with numbers, you should be a CPA," or you should follow in your father's footsteps and be a doctor," or whatever it might be, right? Nothing particularly wrong with that, but it's kind of a preset agenda. And then so many of us follow the rules and go down this particular pathway, and we get the degrees and licenses and get set up in our career, our business, the practice, whatever it may be. And down the road, we start to try to wonder, well, is this really who I am, what I was meant to be, and who am I actually, and what defines me? And then what about the opportunity to make a shift in life? I've seen, and you have as well, observed many hardworking, industrious people that have stayed in a career path, a profession that's been pretty much steady as she goes through many years, and then they come up to kind of the edge of that word that we both hate, but I'll just use it for context here: retirement, which essentially means retire from service. And I don't ever want to retire from service, but that point where it's like, well, now I can take my foot off the pedal. Okay, that's what I've been working for my whole life, for 35 darn years, And then they look over that line and say, yeah, but who am I now? I haven't trained for this. I have no idea. So I'm going to stop there. I want our listeners to understand a little bit about your history, because you've reinvented like multiple times. I probably only know a fraction of the number of times you reinvented. But growing up as a child in Rhodesia, which through the Civil War became Zimbabwe, and you escaping to the States, and later your family having to escape that unrest and Civil War, so much change there. You coming from being a 5-star Class A, AAA guide in Zimbabwe, and then coming to the States to get into the financial world. And wow, what a juxtaposition that was, and changes there. So I'll stop there and let you kind of go back in time and weave through some of the iterations you've made, and then we'll dig into a little bit more what qualifies someone to be who they are, and why there's so much I think misapplication of qualifications.
Yeah, fantastic. There's so much there, and that I do want to come back to, including the narrative that we inherit, where that comes from, and how it inadvertently disables instead of enables a bigger future for us. In my own case, I have had many privileges in my life, including growing up in a horrific civil war. At the time, didn't feel like much of a privilege, but many different iterations of these privileges. And one of them was growing up with parents who never dared to carve my path for me, or even suggest that they had a better idea of my future than I could. And what a gift that is. And I knew it as a beneficiary, but never as a donor, so to speak, as to donate to give somebody their own future back, as much as I did when I became a parent. That instinct to want to guide our loved ones is entirely about trying to avoid their scar tissue, their version of our own personal scar tissue. Equally, the things that have worked for us are what we encourage them to do, whether that's avoiding pain or increasing comfort, delivered in various ways as less heartbreak, more money, or what have you. And so it's coming from a place of real love. But I think there's a difference between loving an idea and loving a person, between trusting ourselves and trusting others. And so for me, it's been this giant trust fall as a parent, as both my kids now go away to college, allowing them the freedom of their own experience. And what a terrifying but powerful thing that is to give somebody. Maybe the greatest freedom is allowing others to have their own experience.
Well, give us just that. That's really, I think, a great point, because you're right. So many parents, and I've fallen to this as well, is trying to make the path easier for our kids, and that's so wrong of us. I think there's sometimes we feel guilty because maybe we're not present enough, so we try to make the path easier to make up for it somehow. Your parents, who I've had the pleasure and privilege to meet, how was that a more a cultural thing in Zimbabwe, or was that just your parents that seemed to have this this realization that they wouldn't be doing you as their children favors by guiding or crafting where you would go? Where did that come from?
It's a great question. Whether or not it was a cultural thing, I don't think so, because, for example, I have a couple of cousins who literally grew up and went to work for the same boss that their father did. And these are blood cousins of mine. So I think it's a pathology unique to the combination of John and Heidi that spun off this particular bent and twisted chromosome that is or are the three kids that they had. That, you've captured it perfectly, that instinct to want to make it easier for our kids, as if it is anything about the ease of our path that gave us the lessons we have. What a preposterous thought that is. Of course, it doesn't stop us from thinking it, right. But it's really rooted in fear. It's rooted in fear, concern for harm and future pain for them. And I suspect that at its core, in my case, one of the skills cultivated in my family, born of the crucible of civil war and conflict and, the world's greatest hyperinflation, civil unrest, economic uncertainty, all of these things that was the soundtrack of all of our lives, not just my generation, is a sense of scale of just how wrong things can go. The true kind of VIX index of real volatility in the world. It's not just that you got a flat tire or spilt your Starbucks on your pants on the way into the office. It's that there was an armed group of thugs that stood between you and the office, for example. So once you get a sense of the scale of possible difficulty, I think that the idea of your kid maybe choosing a line of work that doesn't interest them anymore and reinventing themselves is a heck of a lot easier and more palatable to deal with than some of the other kind of contrasts. The contrast is just so much greater that we enjoyed. And with it, a degree of comfort with managing crisis situations. To know the level of crises that we did is to make the prospect of a bad investment nothing other than just another scar on your elbow, another lesson in the archives of your own journey.
So you were, as I said, top rated, highly successful at a very young age as a guide and taking guests and people on safaris in Zimbabwe, and certainly that was an era of your life where there were many times no actual maps. I mean, there was no map. I mean, you were actually on a frontier that others had not taken. So we think in terms of, well, give me the map on how I get to there, right? There geographically, or there to some point in my life that I'd like to ascribe to, have that degree, that profession. So we have these paths that are kind of laid out for us. And if you get off track, there's someone right there to tell you, well, nope, back on track, or you missed the score on that one. For you, the score was you came back alive many times. I mean, that was the score, right?
Yeah.
So you're figuring this out on the fly. So, very much at a young age, you already had this built into you. So definite resiliency that a lot of us in the Western world, have not faced. And I think that, again, portrays into what we're talking about today is this fear of giving up what we know, the terrified nature of letting go of something that the puzzles that we've already figured out, to some degree, and saying, "Oh my gosh, I've got that figured out. I better not step outside of this because I might mess that up." Well, your whole life was about, you better keep moving, or your thing's going to happen. And so take it up from there, and I want to talk a little bit about your one of your large reinventions was when you came to the States for the first time. I think you were around 20-ish, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, mid-20s.
Mid-20s, yeah. So yeah, give us a little bit of context about some of that.
Well, the safari thing was certainly in the process of it. I don't think anybody would have said I was successful, but one of the joys that hopefully all of us have experienced is loving what it is that we're doing. And I loved the danger, the intrigue, the pay, the kind of spiciness and adventure of the safari and expeditionary life that I was partially, I don't say born into, because my parents always lived in one of the cities in Zimbabwe, a town called Bulawayo, which is where I spent huge swathes of my childhood out in the bush. My father was a chairman of the Zimbabwe Hunters Association, so we spent many years out in the boonies. And so right out of high school, I started my first business and was folding multiple apprenticeships. Zimbabwe had a very high bar for a professional guides license. The average it was an old school apprenticeship model that would take about 5 years. For some, it would take as long as 7 years.
So just to be clear, you didn't sit in a formal classroom and work off of a computer screen. This was I'm being a little bit cynical, but what I'm saying is apprentice model means you were out there and gaining the knowledge and experience, real time, like on the job apprentice training, versus so much of what we do is academic and theory, and then you get to start to try a little bit of what you've supposedly learned. But yours was real time.
Yeah, it absolutely was. It is, and you have a mentor, and your job is to wash their truck and pack the vehicle and build the camp and break it, and be able to entertain guests of different languages and cultures around the world. And over the course of the years, you have a combination of physical, as in experiential week-long exams where crisis situations are created in the middle of the night. Some of the examiners would say, fire a shot at 1 o'clock in the morning, and everybody's got to wake up, and in the middle of nowhere, you don't have any electricity, you have nothing. You've got to figure out, is the camp under attack? Did something violate the perimeter of the camp, or what have you? So you've got to find water. You've got to be able to explain not just the Latin name of every, and I mean grasses and bushes and trees and animals, but medicinal use, historic context, cultural appropriations and so forth of these medicines and everything. And this is why it takes so many years. And there's written exams, and then there's, as I say, a couple of week-long experience exams where there's traps. It's very low passing record even years in. So I had stumbled into, just by good fortune, discovering the value of mentors, excellent mentors at a very young age. By the time I was 19, I was working with and under, to this day, some of the finest guides to ever emerge from Africa. And these gentlemen completely folded time for me, and they never went easy on me. So they gave me a combination of their years of insight, folded into just a few, allowing me in the space of just 3 years to go from really a rookie to the most qualified guide in the country. I was the only person qualified to do everything from canoeing to walking to kayaking to bow hunting to et cetera, and it wasn't because I was looking for the accolades. I just loved the investigation. I've always been an autodidact, which is really just, in my term, really is somebody who's taken responsibility for their own education. And I think this is very, very important. It has been for me, and it's one that I advocate for my kids. My daughter right now, as you know, is studying microbiology and Arabic, a double major. She leaves tomorrow for a 2-month-long stint in Jordan. In the space of 18 months, she's almost entirely fluent in Arabic and will be when she returns. How she fell in love with that doesn't matter, except for the fact that I've dragged my kids around the world and forced them into circumstances where they've had a true appreciation for multiculturalism and so forth. My son has intentions of being an astronautical engineer. Whether or not these things come to pass, whether my daughter does become an Arabic-speaking epidemiologist or not, is of no consequence to me. All that matters is that they live an interested life and they take responsibility for their own education. Because when we do that, especially the latter, school never stops. We're eternal students. And there are mentors out there, as I learned early on, that can fold time and spare us unnecessary pain and afford us a whole new level of leverage and growth that we would just maybe never reached on our own.
So when you were here in the States and trying to find your way, no longer as a guide, as you had done successfully for many years, but now really trying to figure out, in what to do in the arena of wealth management. And I remember you telling a story a little bit about how you really kind of took it on the shin for the first year, a couple of years, whatever it was, where things were just not going well for you. Different culture, different language and language idioms, and just the whole thing was different. And there was a point where, maybe to yourself, I don't know if you spoke it out loud, but a point where you felt, maybe this is just not the place for me. Maybe I just need to go back to Zimbabwe. At least I know that I can go back and do what I did, and I know how to run things there. You didn't. You stuck around, and I think another realization you had, if I remember correctly, is you were watching some of your colleagues that were, in your mind, successful in the realm that you were trying to become successful, and having difficulty, and thinking, well, I need to behave, act like, be more like they are, taking and changing yourself to be like somebody else, in effect, to become, quote, successful, whatever that meant. But you kind of snapped out of that and said, wait a minute, that's, why would I do it? Why would I change myself? I'm a unique person, as is everybody who's listening, a unique person with unique qualifications. You don't need to be like somebody else. So stop the comparison. So how did you come about that kind of that change, and how did you move forward from there? And obviously you righted yourself and have gone forward, very successfully, not without turns and twists along the way, but certainly you managed it.
I did. I moved to New York City. I left Zimbabwe and sold my safari business shortly after getting what is really a career-making deal, which is a source-to-sea expedition for National Geographic. And in the safari business, there I was at age 21, 22, with a National Geographic contract with perhaps the world's greatest living travel writer, Paul Theroux, a gentleman who still to this day is a friend of mine. Getting that sort of commission is the equivalent in the safari business of really an endorsement from Oprah, if you're trying to sell something, whatever the case may be. It was just an absolute career maker, and I left. I decided to leave, and it upset a lot of friends of mine. And I just share this for our friends out there, because when you show up differently, it scares those that are closest to you. It scares Auntie May when you sit in a different spot at the Thanksgiving table. It's a distortion of what they're used to. And I have had the privilege of that never being the case with my parents. They were, at any point, I think that they'll never be surprised by anything I do at this point. I don't think I could surprise them. But it upset and surprised a lot of friends and peers of mine, because to do that, to say, hey, I've reached this, what appears to be a summit in the industry that would set me up truly for a lifetime of ongoing high-level contracts of expeditions and first descents of various rivers in Africa and so forth that I was doing, would absolutely have set me up for life. But in order to feel comfortable with those we love or care about or even admire, to feel comfortable with their choice to do so, is to force those same questions of discomfort on myself. Why am I not listening to that little voice that says, hey, what else could be out there? That voice that says, hey, maybe this is a false summit, which is what it felt like to me in terms of my capabilities. I also knew that African adventure was always going to be there for me, and I could come back to it. But so I moved to New York, and being kind of autodidact who had been really just working for myself since I was a kid, I started my first business, and a few years later, then moved to New York to get a job on Wall Street, because I was sure that that would be, it just sounded like a lot of fun. This is in the late 90s, which of course everything was about Wall Street and the tech bubble and so forth. And I was able to talk my way into a position at a firm that was a fairly well-to-do firm. And I did it with the successful deployment of lies, which is to say that I lied about my credibility as, somebody with an economics and finance degree and so forth. Now, that was certainly shameful behavior on mine. But I think that there's just as much shame that the industry didn't even notice that I was lying. I think there's shame on the industry that the bar is actually that low that they'd be willing to accept me. And I basically just looked around the room and figured out what I needed to learn, and I needed to learn it faster than everyone else in the room, and more proficiently. Needed to be more proficient, faster than anyone else. And so I, as the kids say, I did the reading, and I did all the reading. And within the space of a few weeks, I felt capable enough to not just have to BS my way through a day. And so I did. I set off on that path. And I was horribly misguided by this critical mistake that I think a lot of our friends, especially those with specialty degrees, surgeons, docs, dentists, veterinarians, etc., which is mistaking the how for the what. And what I mean is that there was an individual in particular that I looked at who was apparently creating the results that I wanted to mimic in New York at the time. His income, his lifestyle was really admirable. But I thought in order to create those results, I not just needed to do what he was doing, but to operate the way he did. So I was focused on how it is that he was, more on how it is that what it was that he was doing than who it is that he was, or how he was doing it. And I realized I had this existential crisis of thinking, it didn't take me, it was a year or so into this wasted journey trying to mimic the results of somebody whose results I admired, but whose character and qualities I didn't. Equally, whose price they were paying for the results they were creating were not prices I wanted to or felt necessary to pay. In this case, integrity, ethics, morals, and so forth. To which one might say, yes, but you lied about your credentials. That's true. I did. It's my conviction that the ultimate qualification, the only one that really matters, is results. That's all that matters. It's the ace that can be played at every game, and it ends the game immediately. All I care about is someone's ability to create results, whether they're going to be a mentor of mine or an employee. And it's the same standard I hold myself to. But looking at this individual, I realized that I could go down this path and it would work. But would it be successful? And it wouldn't. It would have worked, but it wouldn't have been successful. And what I mean by that is I would need, while I could create that income, those results, etc., I would show up, I would arrive there as someone other than who I was, which would make it a tremendously, effective failure for me. And so that was enough. And with that, I promptly left New York because I jokingly say I couldn't grow a dorsal fin. And that's really what it felt like by the time I departed.
So you left New York, but you went in and started with another firm where you could do it the way you felt was appropriate, and you were successful in that realm for some years, and in fact quite successful. Anything about that until we talk about your next turn? Anything along making that transition that you made?
Yeah, I that transition, I went from that kind of insight of moving away from transaction and more to relationship, which is what I prefer. I'm in the relationship business. I want to work with good people doing good work for a long time, as opposed to, the standard three ways that anyone can serve is sell more widgets, sell higher priced widgets, or sell them more often. I'm interested in the longer term relationships. And so the shift from transaction to relationship was the first kind of breakthrough in my path. I wasn't clear about that's what it was until I looked up and deconstructed that comparative win, only to then fall into another era of thinking, which is to disregard my own experience in the service of subordinating my experience to the experience or wisdom of other geniuses or what have you. And this is not a hard trap to fall into. Coming from a third world country as an autodidact, a self-taught entrepreneur, to now find myself surrounded by these gurus of finance in the most powerful, places in America, it was very easy to subordinate my own experience. And that manifested as me getting my butt kicked with the bursting of the tech bubble and the subsequent recession. And it was the deconstruction of that made me see that the value of my past and the volatility and cyclicality of third world economies being what I refer to as the tail end of the whip. If the first world is the handle, well, those of us in the third world are breaking the speed of sound. And that was extremely valuable. And I thought to myself, I've successfully navigated that. Why would I struggle with a 10-mile-an-hour relative rate of change, relative speed? Yeah, it didn't make sense. So going back and then revisiting and mining my own experience was the next breakthrough that led to the formation of an investment partnership, through which I was fortunate enough to accurately call and warn about and profit from the housing bubbles bursting, and then the financial crisis, both of which were the most profitable times of my life, and then shepherding clients through that. So these ongoing versions of Reinvention are very familiar to me, and the same with the departure of that industry, which is that another story. But equally, those that cared about me thought this time he's really bumped his head.
Yeah, your departure from that really had to do with your enabling, not enabling. Well, in some way it was, but a lot, I should say, allowing a person you care very much for in your family to go on their frontier, to have the opportunity to do what they aspired to do, and you were not going to be an obstacle or a challenge for that to happen. So basically, you sacrificed what you were doing and doing quite well at that point, and made a complete geographic move across the country. Well, as we're talking about here, you reinvented yourself once again, without degrees or licenses, but this time you didn't actually need them. You didn't need them before either. I mean, let's just be frank about it. So we're talking about here, like, what are these degrees and licenses all about anyway, right? It's just someone put something in your hand, said, "Job well done."
External validation.
Totally.
Yeah.
But again, those shifts that you made along the way, I think what I'm driving for here is it's so difficult for most of us, and I'll just raise my hand and be one of those that says, when I got to a certain point, that false summit, but it's a summit, we think that was the one we want to reach, and you get kind of in that comfort zone. And I mean, life's never perfect, it never is, and you maybe never have all the money and security, because there's no way to have that. As you said, things change all the time. If you ever think you're going to build something that's going to be the final protector, well, you're kidding yourself. So get over that. The real skills come from what John and Heidi, allowed you to do, and that is develop scar tissue with your experiences, so that when things did come up, whether they were in your control or not in your control, but you had choices, you had options, you could move, you could pivot without going into a hole or throwing your arms up in the air and saying, "Oh, I'm a victim of circumstances, and this is not fair." You just pivoted, and really life for you in being successful in all the maneuvers and pivots you've made has been about just that, is that it even goes back to your time in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, always looking for the moves and counter moves. I mean, that's kind of, again, another metaphor for your life, is that's what you've been. Hard for us that have gone down this path of very strict regimented education into a very specialized degree of competency, very specialized, which therein, I believe, lies the danger. But we're always told, well, that's where the gold is the specialization. But that can be changed on a dime today. We've seen it. We see it happen right now all the time. I think it's not a good place to be in developing additional skill sets and the ability to be willing to reinvent ourselves on the fly, but doing it intentionally as we're going along and not waiting till we need to do it. That's kind of too late, when you get to that point.
It's so true. I love the quote by E.O. Wilson, the biologist, who said specialization is for insects, which is, of course, fantastic because he himself was a specialist biologist. But I think his point is an important one. In my case, I have come to believe that while specialization is, of course, incredibly difficult at level of mastery, and it's to be admired, when I think about growth and expansion, I find that specialization just doesn't serve my particular preference. In fact, as somebody who has had specialists working for him, I found that there's a certain degree, there's a certain frontier that we get to in our own personal expansion, where we go from knowledge of how to do things to knowledge of how to support others doing it, which is really leadership ascension, moving to the level of mentor teacher, whether it's for employees or junior business partners or whatever the case may be. And in that, seeing the world through that lens, we see that from a leadership position, specialization doesn't really serve us as much as generalists do. Generalists are high-level leadership generalists, I say, will do so much more to advance a cause, a team, a practice, a business than high-level specialized skills. They just cannot see the forest for the trees. Again, this is my own path. Having said that, the most interesting leap to make, and one I love to support people and help them do, is to move from specialist to high-level generalist, because that's actually a lateral move. And it's a very powerful one. And that comes back to the lesson of me watching this individual. Those that specialize tend to feel trapped in their identity the most, because they are paying attention to how they're doing what they're doing and not what they're actually doing. So what they're actually doing, let's say a practice owner, they say, well, I'm an oral surgeon. Yes, that might be true. Excuse me, I've got my what's and how's reversed. That's what it is that you're doing. But the real what is the how underneath that, which is how? Well, by handling HR and overhead and supplies and culture and patient experience and clinical outcomes. And so you're actually an accidental genius generalist masquerading as a successful specialist. And so what I love to do is to just shine a light back on all of the component pieces that have helped them truly get to the level they have. It wasn't purely about their clinical efficiencies. In fact, in the scheme of things, that was probably, 10, 20%
Very
of your
small,
overall,
yes.
very small percentage of the macro outcomes. It's the people, the culture, the processes, the patients, that's what did it. And the business sophistication that actually gave you the bulk of the results that you have. And if you don't believe me, you can hire somebody to do that, but you can't hire them to care or know as much as you do. And this is where I do speak from experience. I've had doctors and surgeons and so forth work for me, but I've never worked for a specialist myself. Do you know what I mean? I've never, it doesn't necessarily translate the other way.
Right. Yes, you can hire those. I think
Yeah.
we for so long have looked at it at a career path being a very kind of linear projection of a tunnel that just gets more and more specialized and higher efficiency in the what we're doing. And you said it well. You said, talk about lateral moves. I look at it more like a checkerboard. where the moves are lateral, they're forward or backward, they're left, they're right. And having really, I think, a portfolio of projects that one is working on, and mining all those different generalized skill sets that you just talked about, mining those deeply and realizing that those are really the foundation of your ability, the entrepreneur's ability to solve all kinds of problems. You happen to be solving the one that you were trained for, perhaps, with that high degree of specialization, but using all those other skill sets. But where else could you transfer those same generalized skill sets that you really haven't realized that you've gained? No one gave you a certificate for that one, right? Or this one.
Yes.
But you getting your certificate was like yours. You survived. You survived it. You survived it, and yet no one was there to anoint you. So you don't think anything of it. Well, where's my? No one told me I was that. No, you are. So you can take those generalized skills and move those and shift those. And I think that's the world we live in today. And if I was sewing into as we get to do, younger people as they're ascribing, or just like you are with Abby and Angus, just letting them take experiences and experiences they've already had and lessons they're already learning, and they'll get to mine those and go forward, and they will get to shift and move. And the world is always dynamic, and people that have that ability and don't look askew at change in a dynamic world as being something that's bad or scary. This is the normal. It's like getting on the ride, the roller coaster. If you like roller coasters and say, this is what I came here for, right? Now somebody will say, no, not for me. But if you like that, you said, jump in, let's go do it again. I mean, that was fun, so it's the way you look at it.
It really is. The journey, to pick up that original point that you laid down there of efficiencies and so forth that a doc might seek, we can look at it and say, hey, it would be really valuable for me to be more efficient with my time in this particular procedure, for example. But I look at it and say, well, first of all, I don't have that skill set, but it's probably be really efficient if I could have more doctors doing that. So, if I am deploying and utilizing and leveraging the skills of many, then those same efficiencies and opportunities are available to all of them. So I say, that's great. Let's run all of my docs at my practice through this training. Right. It's the same principle, but at scale. But we can't do that as long as we are confused about the what and how, what it is that we're actually doing, and how we're actually making a difference. And this is where the soft skills don't get anywhere near the attention they should in most medical schools. They'll run a practice into the ground. Yeah. By spending so much on CE, thinking that's going to save them, for example. And I'm not immune to these types of bad ideas. I've test-driven hundreds of them, unfortunately. So I don't have any judgment, but I think it's just an unnecessary shame of the bias of a post-academic life, which is what all of us, not us, not myself, but all of the docs that work for me or that I work with as clients, they're in a post-academic world. And this is the next version. For many, they reach a point where they have the resources, and this is really where you shine, is giving them not just the wisdom and insight to full time for how they can go through their next iteration, which is so we've gone from academic to post-academic to post-practice, which is to say post-time for money, which is the hands down the biggest shift that anybody ever makes in their economic life, is escaping the time for money trap. And that, as I say, I don't know anybody that does that better than you, particularly with the level of authenticity and credibility that you have. That is the next frontier for so many others. Outside of the skills and knowledge that you give them, you also give them that thing that we all desperately want from time to time in different domains, which is permission. Permission to walk out on the ice. No problem. Look, others have survived. It's strong enough to hold you. And that is a huge, huge leap. And that's where I see you really change people's lives.
Well, I love these conversations that we get to have. And I think it's great that we have a chance to share some of them, because I think they're so relevant to so many people, not just to keep them a secret, but we learn together from the people that we intentionally put around us, or we ascribe to be around certain people. And I'm genuinely glad that you'll be with us at the next Freedom Founders meeting in Dallas next week, where we'll continue this conversation and take it to some additional levels. Always love being with you, Alistair.
Likewise, David, I'm looking forward to it. I want to talk about Karl Marx and the trap that we fell into that we thought was purely communist. It's not. We're living it. There's so many things. We get way more tactical with the members of Freedom Founders in just a few days. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. Take care, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed watching or learning from this video, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more content. If you have a question about any of my content or this specific video, just please leave a comment down below. And as always, stay focused on your freedom. I'll see you next time.